So where did you grow up yourself?
Just in a small town called Walkerton, that's a couple hours north of Toronto.
How small are we talking?
I think it was at the time 6,000 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bigger or smaller now?
It's probably like 1,000 people bigger,
Right.
maybe 7,000 now.
Right.
Still, when I visit it, it's still the same little town.
Awesome. So how did you end up developing video games, or how did you first get a love for video games?
Yeah, I remember my interest was I remember it very specifically back when I was in grade 8 even. My brother was starting high school and he was telling me about the Apple II Plus computers they had at school, and I was just fascinated. So I hadn't even touched one, and he would bring his books home about how to do programming for them. So I was just fascinated by the idea, and we were playing Dungeons and Dragons at the time. And so I remember even before I touched a computer, I was writing out little print statements on paper and made my own little game basically in my head written down. And then it wasn't until I got into grade 9 where I got to actually get my hands on that. And I'd come in early in the morning into school, an hour early, just to mess around on the Apple II Pluses.
Amazing. Compiling on paper.
Yeah, on paper, and then I
knowledge.
started inputting them and just messing around and just learning. And it wasn't till I think about a year later that my brother and I pooled our money, and our parents helped us buy our first Apple II Plus computer, and that's kind of when it really took off.
So obviously this is an era before you could go to university and study how to do game design or
Oh yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
programming at that stage. So what was the transition like from being an enthusiast as a child to then eventually starting a company?
Yeah, the transition was that in my head, like it always, like through grade 9 all the way through to the end of university, I always had in my head that I would do games just in my spare time as a hobby. It was always a hobby in my head. There was never any thought that it would be a full-time job. I remember at the time, EA, or before EA, was Distinctive Software out in Vancouver when I was in university, had co-op work terms, and I applied. Of course, I wasn't getting into a real job in games, so I kind of put that out of my head. But yeah, I'd made games all throughout university. I went to university for mechanical engineering and expected to go into mechanical engineering. And one of the little games I was making through university, I got published in this little kind of magazine disc thing called Big Blue Disc. That would be on, you'd see it on the magazine shelves, and it would come out monthly. And I was just looking around for something to do with my game that I finished, which is kind of a cool little game, and I sent it to them, and they paid me my $1,200 for the rights to do that. And so I was amazed that I actually made a little bit of money from this tiny little game. And so that's kind of the first stepping stone to get it to the professional and actually money coming in.
What was the game?
It was called Legends of Murder. You can search it online and probably find it. I think I found it somewhere.
Fantastic title.
And it actually works. I was just playing it a couple months ago. You can download it somewhere, and it's funny little game.
So was that the point where you were thinking, oh, actually, this might be a viable source of
I
income?
still thought at that point it would be a hobby and I thought it'd be fantastic if I could make a little bit of extra income from that. And so as I was finishing university, I was making, I'd be making bigger and bigger games, and I made this one game after, was a big fan of Star Trek at the time, and it was and then a game called Star Control had come out. I just loved this idea in my mind of combining those two things, and I ended up making this game called Solar Winds, which was just finishing up as I was graduating university. And right around that time, I knew this game was a little bit bigger, a little bit more interesting, a little bit more viable as a real product. And so I remember playing Hugo's House of Horrors, which was a shareware game at the time. And I actually physically wrote an actual letter to David Gray. I do believe his name is. I can't believe I remember that. And I sent the letter off to him. I asked, can people make money from shareware because you're giving it away for free? And he wrote back and he told me about CompuServe. It was a good online area where people discuss games and shareware and stuff like that. And he said, yeah, some people make a few bucks and some people make $1 million. And of course that, my mind exploded. And I think from there, that's where I got onto CompuServe, and I found out about Apogee and Epic Games. And I got in contact with those guys. And that first game, Solar Winds, ended up I met Mark Rain, and the first game ended up being published by Epic Mega Games at the time.
Right.
And yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and I got to meet other developers, and that was kind of the start of the whole thing, just as I was graduating university. So I was fortunate to never actually have a real job, much to the disappointment of my parents at the time, because I was graduating university, I had a really great job offer, and then I declined it to make my games that were barely making any money at the time.
Right, yeah.
I think there was an 8-month period or a 6-month period where I wasn't making pretty much anything, and then Solar Winds came out and it was making a little bit of money, enough to survive on.
You weren't living at home at this stage?
No, I was still out and just, finished up university and just living in cheap places, and I just loved it because it was like, I think I was making about $1,200 a month from Solar Winds, and I was like working on my next game. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna go from $1,200 a month to $2,400 a month. So I can actually live reasonable on that. And so it was exciting times, and I just loved the work. And the game that came after that was Epic Pinball. Right. And so as I was making, I was like, okay, this is good. This game is my best yet. It's going really well. And so I was really quite excited about it, thinking, yeah, maybe I'll make more than $2,400 a month. Maybe I'll make $3,000. It's like in my mind, oh my God, $4,000 a month? That would be living in luxury. And of course it comes out, and it was a monster, like for individual, for one person making, it was a monster hit. And I just remember my first check was like $50,000. So it was a whole new world. And that was kind of the start of the upward climb.
Right. I think when we're outside people looking in, we think about game studios as having very sort of competitive relationships with each other. But those early years between yourselves and Epic, it's incredibly collaborative. It's
everybody was collaborative. Right. And it's interesting, it's like even back then, unless you were making a directly competing game, which wasn't too often, it was very collaborative with everybody. And I find that these days as well, like now that we're doing free-to-play, there's very few games that you find that kind of eat into your territory,
right.
Where you see customers being drawn. So it's like really, I think you're much more able to be collaborative because you don't have this, when you're doing free-to-play, because you don't have this big collision of two big products potentially coming out at the same time. Not necessarily. It's just much more free-flowing, I think, with the free-to-play, because it's much more longer term.
Right.
So for that kind of stuff, our view is like, it's a much less, you still want to do well, but it's a much less directly competitive landscape, just like it was back in those days as well.
So let's talk a little bit about the collaboration over Unreal then. How did that all come about? Because you guys were like instrumental in the entire conceptualization of that.
Yeah,
right?
We co-created Epic's Unreal. I was researching 3D programming after Epic Pinball while Extreme Pinball was being done, because I was fascinated by that. And then, I think we collectively thought moving to retail was where the bigger games were going to be. So Tim Sweeney had hired some people, and I had hired my guys, and we collaborated on, and it took a number of years for the product to finally come out. But yeah, it was a really fascinating time, and a lot of, I think we were very lucky on all sides to have some extremely talented people that we collectively found and worked with, that have clearly gone on to do amazing things themselves. Right. So yeah, it was a crazy wild time, and we were working literally for a while there, 80-hour work weeks. Right. And it was certainly tough trying to get that baby shipped.
Were you heading then to North Carolina? Were they coming up here?
For Unreal, they came up here, and then for Unreal Tournament, we went down there. Just the group of people was, I think it was really, really high pressure. Unreal Tournament was a lot more enjoyable. Right. But Unreal, shipping that big product, just the people, I just remember Tim worked the hardest. He was always at the computer and working with Cliff Blazinski, and it was a great group of people that really pulled out all the stops. Like everybody was incredibly committed to making a great product. So it was, I think that's my biggest memory. It's just like we were there all the time. There's arguments, and but generally a really intense but very memorable experience. Right. I think everybody on that team would say it's hard to forget all, or not that you want to forget, but it's just like it was so intense and so such a big deal that it was all of it was memorable.
And then I guess the train kept rolling because the UT was originally sort of going to be like some sort of expansion or content pack, right?
Yeah, it was an expansion pack, and we all were just, and it was much more relaxed, I think, doing Unreal Tournament. So we all, I think we were super passionate about Unreal, but Unreal Tournament I felt became more creative because we felt we had a little more time. And a lot of people did some amazing extra things. It was super collaborative in that if somebody had an idea, they'd try it out, we'd discuss it, and I think that's what ended up allowing us to get so much stuff into the game and what really made it shine. So it was definitely one of the most interesting development experience. Like as intense as Unreal was and hard and really just trying to ship a game, Unreal Tournament was, I think, felt more creative and a little less pressure, but that allowed us to make even a better game, I think.
And you can kind of see that in the end product, in that like, if you do the, oft-made comparison with Quake 3, which had come out that same year, right? There's like, Unreal Tournament, in terms of level design and weapon design, and even character skin design and stuff, is super wide. It's like all over the place.
Absolutely, yeah. It was a very creative process, and it's funny because we didn't have a specific direction, so everybody was kind of moving in a certain, like I said, people would try something and it's, oh, that's cool, or it doesn't work, and it was very, very creative.
Right.
I think everybody was pushing for creativity.
What was your sort of role on that project? Were you doing like everything? Were you programming?
I mean, I think by that time my programming, because we had so many skilled programmers at that point, so my programming went down, my programming contribution went down, and I think I focused more on the art and weapon. I can proudly say I think all the weapon designs are mine for the most part. So I think that would be my proudest accomplishment on Unreal and Unreal Tournament, is like doing the design for the weapons and the art and all that kind of stuff. But I was trying to fill in the gaps basically. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite weapons from UT?
Oh, the flat cannon's always been my favorite. I was very happy with how that one turned out.
Right. Did you put the smiley face at the end of
the
alt fire?
I did. On the first one, that was me. And the rocket launcher was pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you come up with the Redeemer?
Yes. And do you know that I'm not sure if this story's ever been told. We were all in North Carolina, and we were coming back from lunch somewhere, and we walked past a church called the Redeemer. And it's like, hey, that's a great name for the big guy. So I was walking past a church in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Right.
And so it got the name Redeemer.
A pilotable nuclear weapon.
Yes.
Named after a church.
Yes.
Great. Do you mind if I ask you a couple more about the weapons?
Sure.
Just because it's an interesting vein. One of the things that people love about UT was just the alt fires were so interesting, and then like something like the shock rifle, where you were actually creating like a third fire, combining the two of them. Do you remember coming up with those? Like,
I don't remember specifically. I remember we were all discussing. I know Cliff had a lot of input in the weapons as well, but we wanted something that was more than just basic shooting. And we loved the ways that potential combining the alt fires to add an extra layer of skill on top. So we were always looking for a way to add that. You shoot the weapon in its basic form and you can do well, but if you have that extra skill and you can do the combos or whatever, that there's an extra layer of skill that's kind of built on top of the weapons. So that was definitely the intention, as much as we possibly could.
Like the rocket launcher, where you can fire it like 5 different ways almost.
Yes,
so like
exactly.
Circle together or wide.
Exactly. So that was, I think the one alt fire mode wasn't as good on that one. But that was the intention, is to always look for something, some way that it could either, the alt fire and regular fire could be combined with itself or with other weapons or as much as we possibly could.
Do you have any favorite maps from that original 99 one?
Facing Worlds. Cedric's map was definitely one of our favorites that we played in the office. There's a lot of really good ones. I like Deck 16 was awesome. It was Misha's map that was very memorable.
Right.
I think those are the two that stick out in my head.
And probably the two that are still played the most.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah.
That might be. And then there are some really good ones that we did at DE, after the game came out. Or that might have been Unreal Championship that we added that to. No, we did some from Unreal Tournament so long ago. It's hard to remember.
Yeah. So what was the collaboration like then on the rest of the Unreal games? Because obviously you had the console game and then 2003, 2004.
Yeah,
but the teams got bigger as well. So.
Yeah, there was. It was again very collaborative, but we were in different spots at this point. So I think, Unreal Championship we were doing up here with Unreal Tournament 2003, and then almost entirely all of 2004 was Epic, I do believe. So, it was. It was difficult to work separately like that, and as the teams got bigger, and then as each of the companies got focused on different things, it didn't. And we would have loved to continue the partnership on that, but it just became, I think, too difficult, and the companies were growing and moving off in our separate directions. But yeah, they were fantastic to work with. We had some good money coming in. We weren't that big. We were quite successful, but we had our eye on let's make something like the next Halo, like something huge, right? Because the games at that point were getting bigger and bigger, and that was exciting to us. And we wanted to be AAA, huge, biggest games. And so we'd come up with a demo or pitching ideas to publishers looking to use their money to make some product. And it was definitely a challenge that went on with us for many, many years, looking for that product of our own. Right. When possibly the best although I can't complain how things turned out, but possibly the better decision at the time would be to have been taken our own money and made our own small little product that was fully funded ourselves, that wasn't striving to be that big, massive blockbuster.
But that's your own money. It's more risky.
More risky, but then you have full control over it, because just when you're doing a work for hire project, I mean, it's their money, so you're doing what they want, and maybe you never know exactly what they want, or they don't know what they want, and it's always if you look at our history and most independent studios' history, when they have full control, complete control over the product they're making, which often only comes if you're funding it yourself, you will make a better product because you're more passionate about it. It's like fully yours. There's even that layer of not necessarily interference, but that layer of collaboration between the developer and the publisher kind of waters things down potentially if there's miscommunication. But it's trickier. It's trickier is an easy way to put it. And it's like there's not many independent studios that can manage that kind of. Clearly, some of them do it really well, but it's definitely adds a layer of challenge to the process.
What are some of the ones that stand out to you?
The one that jumps to mind is both Dark Sector and the Darkness 2, which are Darkness 2 is awesome to work on because 2K was fantastic to work with. They really were super supportive, and and then Dark Sector was kind of as we know, like kind of the precursor to Warframe many years before, and it's something that everybody was super passionate about, and many elements of that turned out really fantastic. And that was, I think a really exciting project for everybody to work on.
So in that time, obviously we were talking to some of the other folks about the process of pitching games, and then they're saying like, oh, well, that seems like it might work, but why don't you work on this other IP we already have, or something like that. Throughout that process, was there ever a point where you did get to make your own? You were Dark Sector looks like it's about as close as you got, right? Where they were kind of like, we like that, but like maybe twist it this way a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. Like it was, you can see the difference between what Dark Sector was and what Warframe is in terms of kind of the look and feel. And I mean, that's the difference between what the publisher at the time wanted with the game. They wanted something that was more grounded and more kind of set in reality that people could relate to.
Right.
But that said, we did have a huge amount of creative input as to what the product would be. It was sort of, here was the guidelines, and then we got to entirely make the game ourselves.
Yeah. And that can be, creative restrictions are often good as well.
Absolutely, I don't want to, like setting something grounded in reality is a great idea. It makes a lot of sense. Like there's so many successful games that, are set in the real world. And it's definitely an argument for doing that, for sure.
So let's talk about a little bit closer to sort of when Warframe started to be worked on. Could you see, were you like reading the tea leaves in terms of like there was less money going out to independent developers? Was there less of this type of work for you guys? Less work for hire?
Yes, and it was definitely, I mean, you talk to any kind of mid-sized developer, even these days, I think it's and especially back then, it was a huge challenge because the games were becoming bigger and bigger. And the mid-sized games, it was really even more hit or miss if they were to even gain any traction in retail. I mean, there's the growing element of digitally downloaded games, which a lot of people were becoming successful. But yeah, it was a very challenging time, and it was definitely hard to get those, to work with a publisher to get those real, potentially high quality products funded, because there was so much at stake. Like, to compete, you need to put more money in them. And then at that time, we're looking at free to play, and we heard amazing things about some of the more, I mean, World of Tanks is the most perfect example. They did phenomenal, and it was a great game. You know, it wasn't, I don't know what the budget was, but it clearly wasn't like $100 million budget to ship that out the door. And we loved the idea of the fact that, you know, you can initially ship something smaller, and we'd seen this in a few other games, and then grow beyond there. So it really seemed really appealing to us, that concept where you could try something out, see if the fans like it, and then grow as needed. So we knew we needed to do something different, because even through this time span of these past 25 years, as with the successes we had, there was many times when we were just skimming the bottom, close to bankruptcy, and it was just horribly difficult to go through that. And so we'd have these, you know, great, amazing times and ship some amazing products, and then there'd be, you know, when you've got, especially when you have 200 people, 250 people, it is scary as hell to not have work lined up. And you're only and this is more true in our industry in work for hire. You're only good as the last game, because everybody's looking at the Metacritic score of your last game. And if it's not good, you know, becomes that much more difficult to get some quality product signed up.
And it sounds like the studio here hasn't, like, there's a lot of studios which scale up and scale down quite a lot, and it doesn't seem like that is necessarily the case here.
Well, for my personal, like, I would do anything to not have to do that. It's a very, you know, we've had a few minor layoffs in the past, but that's always like the absolute last resort for us, for sure. So it's, I mean, especially, I mean, even more so because we're in London, Ontario. It's like, where's anybody going to go? And if, you know, it's just would be the last thing we would do.
Was there ever a consideration to be bought out by a publisher? So to give away
that's an interesting. We had certainly were interested in the possibility of something like that, but the value of DE before Warframe was almost zero. So, it's like, as a work for hire studio, you know, we owned the Dark Sector IP, but you know, and it was moderately successful, but there really wasn't a lot of value there. We had our own technology, which has some value, but as a studio to be purchased during that kind of time, it was pretty unlikely that was a possibility.
There's probably more people knocking on your door now.
Oh yeah, of course, clearly, It's a whole new, completely different ball game when you've got a product that's bringing in revenue 24 hours a day, right?
So let's talk about the decision to go free to play.
Yes.
Because obviously you said, you know, there's this plucky developer out of Belarus that's got now 20 studios around the world or whatever, 20 offices around the world, making this game that the mainstream gaming press isn't even really considering all that much. Who else were you looking at in terms of free to play? Was it scary, the idea that, like, because you're not swimming
completely.
in capital?
It was a Hail Mary. It was like, it really was.
How close to closing were you guys, or how close to bankruptcy? Or?
Really close. I can tell that story. It was pretty, it was super close. We knew that this was our last chance, and we had a couple $1 million extra, like, to do this with. And yeah, we studied all the games out there. A couple, like a game called Drakensang, which I really enjoyed at the time, and World of Tanks, and was it Battlefield Heroes? I think had done all right as a more Western game in the free-to-play market. So we're looking at anything out there that looked like it was sustaining itself, and that's all we wanted, is like find a self-sustaining product that could pay for itself. And so, yeah, I told Steve and the guys, you got 12 months. That's it. There's like nothing but 12 months. And they planned it. They executed it perfectly. They got through, and we got right to the end there. And it's we found the start of a small little audience, and we turned on the monetization. And I think some of the choices we made there were really excellent, and a little bit of luck, because we didn't know what we were doing at all.
Right.
And it kind of got its feet under itself to support itself, just as we were running out of money.
Right. And
so it launched, and we saw it did well. And then it wasn't until we launched on Steam that we knew we were saved, because we knew leading up to the Steam launch it was making enough money to sustain a small team, but we were 250 people.
Right.
And so it's like we're sweating. It's like, okay, so let's turn on Steam and see how many people we can support. And we turned it on, and it jumped. And I think it started off certainly enough to support the entire studio. And then I think one of the many reasons why Warframe continued its upward climb is then all of a sudden we had 250 people working on Warframe.
Right.
Right. So we did up to that point, but then our updates were so monstrous. Like it wasn't an orchestrated decision, because we were also looking for work for hire work at the time to support the team. But we had a project that kind of fell out at that point. So yeah, we had everybody working on Warframe, and I think because the updates were so ambitious and big with that many people working on it, it certainly allowed the game to grow much more rapidly. So it really was. We were right close to not making it there.
Obviously that was a conscious decision to then put more people on the project. The other decision that could have been made is that you allow that to just be its own self-sustaining thing,
right,
and don't try and scale it up, because there's the worry that if you put many people on it, maybe it doesn't scale up.
Yeah. So and that's what many people would say.
Right.
Many people, we talked to other people in the free-to-play industry, and they said, you're screwed. They first of all saw that it was PvE, they saw it was sci-fi, and they said, for many months, even after it was successful, people were saying your game is going to be dead in 6 months.
Right.
Because it's been tried before. And I think because we had so many people and so many talented people working on it, really each update was so substantial, it really helped build it bigger. So it was accidental that we had so many people on it, but it was really once it was making enough money, it was clearly the right thing to do to keep going. There was no other choice.
And there's a difference between, it seems like a lot of free-to-play studios, or many of them, are quite young studios who then sort of upscale to work on a project, whereas you were working with people who had decades worth of experience. That probably makes a big difference as well.
Yeah, I think it's certainly, it's a very unique situation that we had, no doubt, and something that I don't think anybody else would have the luck or the ability to do, to have that many people ready at the exact right time, ready to go.
Warframe also seems to be out in a time where a lot of, in terms of I don't know how to word this exactly right, but a lot of shooters are acting quite safe in terms of not just their gunplay, but also in terms of the worlds that they create.
Right.
Like they're quite similar to ours, or ours maybe a little bit in the future. Warframe it's like watching European sci-fi or something. It's this completely different, and it's interesting because I'm starting to figure out that perhaps what looked like maybe a barrier to entry is also maybe your unfair advantage, is that you have this very idiosyncratic or very unique world that once people are sort of in on, then they feel really they belong to it.
I think you're entirely correct. That is absolutely, because when we first started making Warframe, my background, as I mentioned, is more on the art side, and my directive to the guys was make whatever you want. Like, let's just make sure we do the free-to-play right. You make what you're excited about. And so our art director is monumentally talented. He just wanted to make what he loved, and I'm seen as like, oh, like it's a little different. And then, but I'm like, yeah, do whatever you want. Do whatever makes you happy. Like, do what you are passionate about, which is a clear advantage, I think, for Warframe itself, is the passion of the team. And then when we showed it to the game to some bigger, like, free-to-play publishers in the world, they're like, oh, I got it's sci-fi, and it's a really different-looking sci-fi. Like, who's gonna like that? And so we're like, at one point, Steve and I met, and we had one of these really disappointing, and the game was almost ready to launch, like I think 2 months before it launched. And we had a big meeting with one of these big publishers, and they just laid it out there like, you're screwed. Like, here are the things you're clearly doing wrong. And Steve and I are just so depressed. It's like, we're fucked. Like, we're in trouble because we're 2 months. We can't change it. Right. We're not changing it. Let's see where it goes. And so, but I think you're right. In the end, it's different, and it's different enough that it appeals to a certain crowd, and they get in there, and that's the world. Right. And it's a unique world.
Why do you think Warframe succeeded in the ways that they thought it wasn't going to? Why do you think it was filling a niche that they just hadn't considered? Or do you think you were scared enough because of everything they were telling you that you were able to pivot your way to success?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of those things. I think it's number one, and I think it will always be this, is like the passion of the team. Like, it's so clear, as I've said in our 25-year history, anytime we've had the ability to do whatever we wanted with no restriction, it's always been really good. Right. And so that was my mandate for this, is it's like, there's no restrictions, like, just, other than just like have it commercially viable with the correct monetization and learning to do free-to-play right, just make the game that you want, that the team's excited about. And so I think that's, the passion of the team is probably the number one thing, just doing what they want to do. And then, what would be the secondary aspect? Yeah, I'm not sure. I would put it all the weight on that. Yeah.
Are you done doing work for hire projects now? Or?
Oh yeah. That's a different. It's really is a different world. I mean, Warframe is all, like, it's been announced we're doing another project. We were doing another project internally, but Warframe is just, as you saw in the Steam charts of Warframe when we had our Plains of Eidolon update, we were wondering if we're near the limit of where Warframe could be, but no, it keeps going up. So there's that demand within the studio to have everybody really helping out and still being passionate about Warframe to increase that, see how big we can make it. So it'll be interesting just to see where the and it's such a new thing, like the way we've done Warframe, that it will be very interesting to see the path it takes over the next few years. But yeah, absolutely, the plan is to keep growing it as big as possible, try to make it as popular as possible, but keep that passion and excitement for what it is and where it's going. The Plains of Eidolon, again, is a great example of how Warframe is what it was, and now it's grown in a really, really interesting way that was super compelling to the fans. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more of that kind of stuff coming. So it'll be really interesting to see how the game evolves and what it becomes, because it's, with so many people working on it, and with such an expandable concept for a game, or an expandable premise, who knows where it could go, but it'll become bigger and really, really interesting.
And presumably that's important to you as well, managing a studio of creative people, in that you haven't sort of shoehorned this whole team into making this very specific game. Like, being able to have the creative agency to say, oh, we'll do an open world thing. Like, I'm sure is as important to the fans. It's probably very important to the culture of the studio as well.
Absolutely. I think that's critical. I think it's, for the longevity of Warframe, having that type of game where it can be expanded in different ways, because many free-to-play games can't be. They are what they are, and it's like, where else are you going to grow it? Yeah. But Warframe can. So I think it's critically important for the team to continue to be passionate about it. Like if all it was is making new weapons and new game modes, you know, at some point it's going to become tedious and boring, and it's like people would need a new creative outlet, and that's where a new game would come in.
Right.
But with Warframe, you can expand it in these really spectacular new ways, and keep the team extremely engaged, because they need to be passionate and engaged to keep the fans passionate and engaged about the product itself.
Last question, we've asked everyone this one. If you had 3 words to describe Warframe to somebody, what would it be? What would they be? Everyone's had to take like 30 seconds to come up with this, so feel free to have time if you need it.
Fun, fast, and cooperative.
Nice.
Yeah,
Right.
I think I've just, those kind of resonate in my head, because a lot of the games I've been playing with my kids lately have been cooperative, and we're just, like, that experience, that element of Warframe, I think, is a real compelling part of it, the cooperative aspect, that you're doing something with your friends, and because it's PvE, you're going out and fighting the enemies. It's I think it really resonates with people.
Are your kids old enough to play Warframe yet?
They do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're getting into it, which is surprising. So they think I'm pretty cool.
Have they played Unreal Tournament?
They haven't played Unreal Tournament. That's, I mean, if you go back and play that now, that's pretty high skill type game.
Those facing world headshots don't
Yeah.
aim themselves.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's tough.